Welcome to Lancefield on the Line. My name is David Lancefield. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Kevin Ellis, the Chairman and Senior Partner of PwC UK in the Middle East Alliance. My old boss, my former boss, I should say. You're not old at all, Kevin. You're in your second term, re-elected after a successful first term back in 2020. By trade, you're a restructuring, turnaround and crisis expert, working with household names in the public and private sector with a particular penchant, I'd say, for pensions and health. Spaces I've worked with you on very enjoyably over the years. You've championed social mobility, equality, technology enablement, and many other things within PwC and the wider business community. You are a father of 4 teenage children, a keen football fan and a skier, and you are really, really welcome, Kevin. Great to see you again.
Great, nice to see you, David.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to talk about all those topics. We might even talk about you and your own leadership style and impact. Go on, we're going to get there. But let's start with social mobility, because that's a champion you've caused for many years now. I know that's a topic that's close to your heart. What is your motivation and background to pursuing it in the first place?
It's a societal, but it's also an economic necessity. I think the era in which I grew up, people didn't really think of diversity in terms of social mobility. I think gender, ethnicity, background were probably the major themes that came through at the turn of the century. I think what I realized was people want to bring the best of themselves to work, and they want to work in an environment where they feel valued for both what they do but also who they are. So if you like, that point of view, it was a no-brainer.
Yes.
But then again, at the end of the day, our success is defined by 2 things. One, the ability to recruit and retain and train top talent. And secondly, being the people that our clients turn to first. So the first one of those is pretty obvious, isn't it? If you're trying to recruit and retain and train the best talent, you want to pick from the widest pond, if you like, or fish in the widest pond. And therefore, everyone's kind of included. And that makes sense. The second one probably kind of came to me later than it should have done, if I'm honest, was it's an absolute economic necessity. We're a business that pretty much, we turn over £3 billion a year, and probably more than 2.5 of that we have to win every year. And when you look where we win it, we win that work from companies not only of all shapes and sizes and across all industries, but also led by people.
Yes.
From all shapes and sizes. And what you suddenly realize, the kind of like light bulb moment for me was people only buy from people that they either relate to, they share the values of, or they feel are like them. So if I don't have the most diverse people, I won't win that amount of work. So, when I'm explaining it to my partners why it's the right thing to do, I always start with, look, we all agree it's the right thing to do societally. But actually,
really
it's economically critical for our own success. And that actually kind of carries the day. And I'm not saying people wouldn't do it for societal reasons, but sometimes people think, oh yeah, but there's a better person here. And you say, well, if we haven't got a diverse workforce, we won't sell to a diverse market.
I can see that. That's really compelling. Both are compelling. The second one is, I'm not sure people have heard that enough yet. So I know that's an area you're talking about in various fora, including this one. So I'm glad we have a platform for this.
Yeah, that's great.
So getting practical, what have you found being as the most effective ways of encouraging social mobility in PwC or in other businesses you work with?
Firstly, I think you've got to make sure everyone feels comfortable here. So that's the culture. I mean, the only long-term critical, defining advantage of an organization is culture. We're no different. So if you want to get the best people in here, you've got to have people, again, that look like them. I can remember at the time we got into technology and we started recruiting some amazing people from the big platform companies like Google and Facebook. They were joining us. I was really excited by that. I knew that our long-term success would require that. And I spoke to them, and they were really young people, and they said, look, it's brilliant. We love the culture. We love the people. We love what we're learning. I said, well, why did you join? And they said, well, in the platform world, being great at technology is a fantastic thing, and we get great technologies to play with and learn from. But we don't really get the industry dimension.
Right.
Whereas here, if I want to do technology in pharma, then I can walk into an office and speak to probably the leading pharma advisor in the world. And I can bring technology to pharma. Right. So that's what's attractive about PwC. And I said, okay, that's fantastic. I'm really pleased about that. So do you think you'll make your career here? Then it wasn't quite so positive. They said, well, frankly, we'll stay for a 3 to 5 year. And there was a group of them talking to me. But unless there's someone that looks like us at the leadership table, then I don't believe you really are serious.
Too big a leap of faith. Yeah.
So again, I think you've got to make sure that there are role models of everyone from every background at the senior roles. Otherwise, people don't believe you have the faith. And then the second thing is you have to show you're authentic in terms of the changes you made. People will excuse you in the short and medium term for not being in the perfectly diverse organization you dream of being. As long as you can show the journey you're on. I know journey is a bit of a kind of hackneyed expression. What I mean by that is flow rates. Yes. I need to be able to shine a light on the diversity I've got and share those flow rates. And I haven't got the option of not sharing them when they're not good. And that's why we publish them every year in our annual report. And, when I share them in the press as well. And I'm honest, I'd like to have more Black employees in senior roles. But if I can show how many Black employees I've got in more junior roles and that they're progressing, it's a start.
Yes.
We're not perfect. But the thing that makes the difference is you can be more honest about your journey as long as you never, if you aren't selective in the data. You've got to be honest with the data. And our DNA is data. So we can collect the data and then we've got to share it. And I think that makes a difference. And I do think that an organization like ours, our convening power has a bigger impact than our own qualification. I find more CEOs speak to me about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. From a positive point of view, so how do I make a difference? How do I do what you're doing? Because that must be a good thing to do. And and it's not out of kind of how clever are we. It's more I can touch the lives of 22,000 people, which is a wonderful thing to be able to do. But if as being an exemplar, or at least trying to be an exemplar, I can touch the lives of more people, that must be a better thing to do.
Yeah, and it's an incredible multiplier effect. And that honesty and transparency is really refreshing. I think people would expect it, but it can be tough, right? When the data doesn't show that, the result of the progression you're looking for.
Yes, that's right.
Let's move on to mental health as a topic. I mean, many people have found the pandemic, living through the pandemic professionally and personally challenging, isolation, loneliness, and so forth, and worse. And I know that's a topic that you've been pioneering and progressing within the firm prior to the pandemic. But if you look ahead, what are you going to be doing to nurture, not just protect, nurture a more mentally healthy workforce and workplace?
Well, I'll look at it in two ways. Firstly, really interesting that when we went into the pandemic, the uncertainty was causing paranoia, fear, and people were struggling. And I could tell that from my own data point when we did a live stream in week 1 of the lockdown with a leading psychiatrist, Dr. Hopley from Cognacity. 13,000 people joined that online, live. And we've only got 22,000 people. So that immediately told me, this is a big issue.
Yes.
As we've got people back to the office, and by nowhere near the numbers that I would hope, but we're on back to the office, I'm kind of positive about that. And I kind of thought, well, that's good news. That worry is over. In fact, what I'm hearing from people who know more about it than me, those experts, that actually the change of coming back is probably as mentally anxiety creating.
Yes, it's a big shift.
Leaving the office. So we've carried on with those live streams. But again, what's really interesting as well is, we've got 22,000 people, average age is 31. And I do loads of presentations, answer loads of questions, all different groups of people. The cohort that are the most honest are often the new joiners on the day one, because they have no boundaries. So they'll ask me any question you like. So I always think it's quite a good barometer of, it's a bit like doing the kind of old-fashioned milk round at university. It's a good barometer of what's on people's minds, who will be our future workforce. And I did a live stream a couple of years ago now. A live introduction to the firm a couple of years ago now. And one of the questions I got asked, and I remember exactly where the lady was sitting who asked me. She said, so what are you really doing about mental health? And I thought it was amazing. I think my answer was all right. And I explained about what we were doing with the helplines, what we're doing with the support, what we're doing with Cognacity and the like. But I said the most important thing is we're trying as an organization not to stigmatize it and be open about it. And that's, I think, where we can make the biggest difference. And I said, by asking that question in front of 600 of your peers on their first day at work, I can tell it's going to be easier in the future than it was in the past.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've used that story many times. I know I cannot imagine when I started work in 1984, I would have ever dared ask that question because I wondered what it said about me. Dreadful thing to admit, but it's true. So I do think the people joining us today are certainly more aware of it and more open to it. We recently offered a training scheme for any of our people, supported by the Samaritans, which is kind of the Samaritans training scheme, to give ourselves more mental health awareness and expertise in the office. And it was oversubscribed. I found that very positive too.
Yes. So there's a lot more about awareness, destigmatizing it, giving more help when it's needed. I guess if you look at the future workplace, and there are lots of discussions about the hybrid workplace, the question is, how do you nurture mental health beyond, if you like, the prevention and the role of it and talking about it? You've been very open about, very candid and bold about the importance of the office at a time when others weren't talking about it. And I can see the benefits in terms of community, serendipity, bumping into people, finding spaces to collaborate, but also there are challenges of being in the office, the presenteeism, the commute to work and so forth. What role do you think it will play in the success of the firm, especially in terms of keeping people healthy?
Well, on two levels. Firstly, we're a business. We have to make money, but to be successful, to do all the things we have to do and support others and create jobs, opportunities, aspiration and learning. So I think as a business, we're more effective if we bring people together.
Yes.
I don't think people want to come to the office to work like they can at home, but I think coming to the office to collaborate, that kind of serendipitous innovation, that ability to learn by observation, that ability to create, if you like, mental resilience by collaboration, friendship, all of those are factors that I don't think you get at home. And I've seen more paranoia from people being at home, misinterpreting texts or emails.
Yes.
In the office, you walk outside and ask someone, you can't do that at home.
Yes.
I was wondering at one stage if I was right on that. And I went and asked one of my friends who's a psychiatrist, is this right? And he made an interesting observation to me. He said, look, if you are struggling from any of the different symptoms of mental health, one of the big ways of helping you manage it is routine. And some of that routine has been lost by home working.
Yes, blurring lines between personal and professional and others, yeah.
So he said, so there is a role. So I think for a healthy, vibrant and successful working environment, having people in the office at least 3 days a week is very important. I do worry that productivity will be achievable remotely, but not in the long term. Because if people can't learn from each other and you can't share the culture from each other, does that really make you a successful organization?
And that apprenticeship model has been critical to PwC in all its guises for many, many years. And
I think for most jobs as well. There's also a risk, isn't there? There's an intergenerational unfairness. Our business, a partnership, is all about legacy. And that legacy doesn't mean just passing on my job to whoever wins the election in 3 years' time. It's passing on the client relationships and the knowledge.
Yes.
And if you didn't want to pass on that knowledge, if you were kind of someone that wanted to hoard that information, wrong though that would be, it's easier to do it if everyone's not in the office.
Yes.
So I do think, again, from the intergenerational unfairness of having the success and the opportunity to succeed by being a receiver of a network, a business relationship, and a skill, it's important that we're all in the office together. Not necessarily full time. We don't have to commute for the sake of commuting, but I do think it's important at least for half the time, because I think there is a danger that people don't know what they don't know, and then will lose out as a consequence, and that isn't fair.
What I like about that, Kevin, is the fact you've actually articulated the reason why you prefer that model. There have been quite a few statements from CEOs I won't name who sort of have this blanket "thou shalt do, shall not do X" for no reason, just I want you back, which I don't think lands well. So let's just talk about you then. You faced some very challenging times. You already have a big job. You've had some challenging times, some big calls to make during the pandemic. You've had a family to look after as well. What have you done to look after yourself?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're a people business, so I think we're lucky in terms of, and you'll know that from being here, the friendships, the support you get from people around you, as long as you're willing to ask. I think, having been here long enough, I know to ask. And then I think there's the simple things like, as our routine changed, I'd never worked from home in my life. And so when we suddenly had to work from home full time, that was strange. So I had to incorporate routines, going for long walks, not doing all Zoom calls or Google FaceTime calls, doing voice calls as well. So I could kind of
mixing it up.
around. Otherwise, I found it very difficult. But, I found working from home hard. I missed the camaraderie. I missed the energy. And I think everyone's quite convinced we were very productive, and I'm sure we were. I think that in the office, I can have more 5-minute conversations, which give me the input I need and the understanding I need. Whereas I think remote working, those conversations probably take 45 minutes.
Yes, yeah.
And the other thing, I get huge energy and fun, really, out of being in the hierarchy of the office. And I miss that. No one arranges a random call with the boss without content. But when I'm in the office, I might have 15 conversations with everyone from Francis on the door to Donna in catering to most of the team wandering around the office in the lift. And I find that gives me energy.
Yeah.
And I think I do a lot of walking around Richmond with the dog. To make up for that lack of energy, if that makes sense.
You look even sharper and fitter than before. And for that may be one reason for it. I mean, you talked about energy there, and you've always been an energetic person. You've got bags of entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, you grew up, everyone knew that you had lots of innovations, entrepreneurial spirit, lots of successes. When you took on the leadership role as managing partner, then as chairman and senior partner, how did you marry that, if you like, that dynamism, that speed, that entrepreneurial spirit with, let me be candid, sometimes the more conservative, cautious nature of a partnership? How do you marry the two?
It's a challenge. I think again, it's who you surround yourself with and who you bounce ideas off. So there are certain people that have 1,001 ideas and 1 or 2 of them might work. But I found having conversations with those people about those ideas, again, some which didn't work, some which did, again, gave me a personal, from a selfish point of view, energy. Hopefully I gave some input to their ideas, but that's up for them to judge. But I think at the same time, in a partnership, a lot of it is about constant change and transformation without necessarily scaring people.
Right, yes.
Because the majority of my people, I don't want to worry about the change. I want to just do their job, service our clients, lead our people, train our people. So I found you've got to drop the words transformation from a lot of things you're talking about. That just happens. And therefore, I think in terms of the entrepreneurial, the change, that was my job. But I had to do it in a way that could tell a story to everybody about where we were going.
Yes. And
kind of gently lead us there without taking people off.
So more inviting, less threatening, less sort of dramatic.
Yeah, I think that was it. And again, we're a massively kind of academic, bright group of people. So you haven't got to tell a lot. You've got to tell enough. As long as you tell it in a kind of relaxed, non-threatening story way,
yes,
they get behind it.
Yes.
I think when you start telling people they're not doing a good job or it's a disaster, then you naturally get their backs up, and in a people business, it becomes actually quite fractious.
Yes.
I think another big learning from that, actually, I think we got right in the end in the pandemic, is communication is everything in this business. And when you're in a time of uncertainty and change, people will fill the vacuum if you're not communicating.
Yes.
So we very deliberately, when we made a decision like not furloughing our people and protecting their jobs, or reopening offices, bringing them back, or opening a new office, every decision we made, the New Deal, what we did was we had the decision taken as a board, and then there was board responsibility. Then I went to the partners in a live stream and explained to the partners what we're doing and why we're doing it. Then I went to the people and told them in a town hall construct what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then I went to the media and told them. And the reason I did that is, again, in times of uncertainty, you want not only your 22,000 people to understand why and what you're doing, but you want their friends, spouses, children, parents to understand
the whole
too.
network.
So, you know, if you want people back in your office, you can't just tell them. You've got to tell those people around them, do you know your offices are open? So I found using the external media and being kind of relatively open to having conversation with the media about what we were doing, as long as done in the right order, was really actually quite useful in getting my message and communication across to kind of fill that vacuum in a positive way rather than allow something else to happen in a negative way in uncertain times.
It's a very strategic, structured approach with all the thought that's gone into it. How did it feel at the time when you were making those calls to go first? You listed 3 or 4 areas where you've gone first vis-a-vis the rest of the big 4, indeed other consultancies and other advisors. How did it feel personally as you were making those calls, either individually on your own or with the board?
Yeah, I suppose it sounds very strategic. I think the first time we went first was no furlough, jobs were safe. My fear then was I wasn't sure whether 22,000 people could work from home. So once we knew the Wi-Fi and the technology worked, my next concern was I didn't want people to be distracted. And everyone I was speaking to, were senior and junior, were expecting redundancies. They were expecting to do something. And therefore I kept saying we weren't. And I thought they're not really believing me, even at the most senior levels of the firm. And I thought the only way to convince them is to go public. So we literally spoke to Ian King at Sky, and his team came down virtually to my street, and I did an interview with Sky outside the front door on that. And it was deliberate. And I thought, so it wasn't really, if I'm honest, about going first. It was how do you quell and effectively get away from this uncertainty in a way, a selfish way and a business way, so that people can just concentrate on doing their jobs.
Yes.
Rather than.
But you didn't leave the gaps, as you said. You didn't leave gaps in, which is the, where people can either, get worried, be unproductive. So it's an economic reason as well as a human reason.
And the feedback I got, when I say the feedback, I got a lot of unsolicited emails and texts from people that lived on their own. And they said, if you live on your own and you've got no one to talk to, hearing you say my job's safe on Sky is far more important than my boss telling me. And they said, that made a massive difference. People told me some really interesting personal reflections on how it felt for them, how their kids reacted to hearing about it. Oh, mum's job safe, dad's job safe. And how important it was at that point in time, because back March last year was a very scary time. The pandemic was in full throttle. No one really knew where we were going. We didn't know whether we were going to get this disease or not. So I think I learned from that this was even more important than I'd ever believed. And therefore, we've used that model repetitively now, and it's worked pretty well for us.
Very good. Let's talk about the future. I mean, you've pioneered technology enablement of the firm as one of your areas of focus. I'm curious about where that goes next, the next wave of innovation and so forth. And related to that, I saw in the new equation, the new global strategy of the firm, which was launched the day before this recording, a big focus on outcomes, becoming an outcomes organization, which you and I will know from the world of health and others, where there's outcomes-based commissioning. What shifts will that encourage in the firm in terms of its mindset and practices, including technology, in, if you like, having that banner around outcomes and your role in sustaining outcomes for clients and enabling them?
Yeah, I think outcomes are a good example of outcomes, I suppose, is Salesforce. Salesforce was something that wasn't a kind of plug and play system, a CRM system. It was a culture change to get a people-led business to share its black book.
Yes.
But the Salesforce was not. So if you like, the outcome on Salesforce was kind of the usage level, not necessarily how many wins we had. Once everyone's using Salesforce and they're collaborating and sharing around clients and winning clients, completely transformational. So I think outcomes with technology, I think too often with technology, it's about the system you're inputting and does it work when you plug it in? It's like buying a new washing machine. But that actually is about, is it usable And is it going to be used by everybody? And that was where the outcomes comes in. It's not about going to the cloud. It's kind of what going to the cloud does for the business in terms of profitability, efficiency, more revenue, more profit. So outcomes really simple, I think. I think the big change is that in professional services, we kind of go in these cycles, recession, growth, and alongside growth, certain sub-cycles to go along at the same time. And they normally happen one at a time. What we're experiencing at the moment, partly driven as a catalyst of the pandemic, is you've got three big cycles taking place at the same time. It's the first time I've ever seen it happen. You've got a deals-led recovery. The reason there's a deals-led recovery is the price of money is so cheap. And if you're holding on to cash, you're not getting in return. So there's a kind of fear of missing out. And our deals activity level is probably 4 times its normal level. Then on top of that, you've got anyone that didn't do the investment in the Salesforce, Workday, Google, whatever technology you want to name, SAP S4HANA, now knows they've got to do it quickly because they damaged their business through the pandemic, the relevance of their business through the pandemic, their ability to communicate and operate through the pandemic has been significantly hampered. Yes. So you've had everyone bring forward what they're going to do in the next 5 or 10 years, probably into the next 2 or 3. The third wave is that the whole world, whether you're making a good and delivering a good, or whether you're creating information or doing stuff, has been kind of geographically agnostic in terms of where it's done, as long as the price is right and as long as it's just in, and that led to just in time. The pandemic changed all that. So when countries have been suffering the pandemic, like Asia or India or Europe, it's meant supply being very, very difficult. And then in addition to that, you've had governments playing around with supply chains in terms of vaccine wars. That means people are not thinking just in time and price, they're thinking certainty. So you're getting people looking at their supply chains completely differently to how they've ever looked at them before. That's 3 waves of professional services advice happening all at the same time. And I can't see it changing. So therefore, it's not about, normally when you have a one wave, you've got a war for talent. You try and nick a few more people from next door or the road down the road or whatever. This isn't about a war for talent. This is about creating new talent at speed in a way we've never seen before. And going back to our earlier conversation about social mobility, there is a massive opportunity that on the back of the success for our business and loads of other businesses through this pandemic, there is this massive need to invest in more firepower, i.e. people, who meet your diversity needs in terms of social mobility, background, gender, ethnicity, but at the same time, you can train quickly for the market opportunity that we all have to grab now. And so today we're announcing that we've done a joint venture in an R&D capability in Belfast. What's interesting is the 800 heads we are going to get from that creation has been done with a collaboration of the universities in that city, the local government, and us. So it's a little bit like with the vaccines. You've got AstraZeneca working with the government.
Yes.
I see more collaboration becoming the model of how you accelerate learnings and how you kind of, if you like, rebalance the intergenerational unfairness we've all experienced over the last 18 months. That, for me, is the big opportunity now for professional services and services in general, creating more opportunity for more diverse talent to grab a market opportunity that's quite unique and is coming at us probably over the next 2 or 3 years in a way we've never seen before.
That is some opportunity, and that's a brilliant development. How do you personally create the space in your head and mind to look around you, look at all the signals, the waves you just referred to, and get the clarity in order to either frame or make or convene people to make decisions? You have a full diary. Everyone wants to talk to you. You're an accessible guy. You want to meet people. You're a personable chap, if I may say so. Well, I can say so. It's my show, and you are. But how do you create the space to sort of see through it? What are your practices?
I think you've always got to, look, I'll be successful. I don't know. I suppose it's trying to keep it always simple. No point being the cleverest person in the room. You can surround yourself by really bright people. What you've got to do is always be able to translate it to the kind of most fearful and nervous person in the room for them to believe they can do it too. So it's really interesting. I was chatting to someone yesterday about a kind of business failure of a leadership team we both knew. And the idea and the strategy was brilliant, but it was so complex no one could understand it.
Right.
And it's really easy in my job or any of these jobs to get to a complex solution. It's much harder to get to a simpler one. So for me, I'm always trying to listen to different points of view, listen to different ideas in different sectors, and then try and simplify it for my world and put a story with it that people can relate to.
I get that. So can I just take that? How do you, once you've done that, and I've seen it and experienced it, how do you then scale it at the speed required?
It's the buy-in. If you can get the story, if you can, however you're going to communicate it, multiply it by 8 or 10. So you have to tell the story over and over again to different audiences. You have to reach into the middle of the organization, not use the cascade, you know that from our organization. It's Chinese whispers, it will lose its impact and its relevance. So I deliberately talk to different groups with the idea in the same way that we use the external media as well as the internal comms team to get the message across. So I you know, the story I just told you, you know, the fact that I shared it with the FT after I'd shared it with our people on our board and our partners was quite deliberate.
Yes.
That way our people will hear it a second time. And funny enough, when people read it in the FT, they believe it more than me saying it. So it's kind of reinforcing the story.
Yes.
That means that you've kind of get more converts at speed who then want to be part of the success and will then take their own personal ownership of that transformational journey, if that makes sense. So
yeah, it does.
I think it's not, I know that I can't do very much. My job really is a comms one. If you can get the communication right, then you can kind of get the buy-in and then you kind of activate it. That's kind of how it works in my mind.
I love how you're searching and creating opportunities. I love how you have an honesty and a transparency about what's working and the progress that needs to be made. And the fact that you look for different voices and stimuli along the way to enrich that and actually, you know, make it happen. And I like the fact that there's a sort of energy that you know, energy and impatience in a good way, and also a sense of, come on, let's do more. Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I remain and will continue to be a very, very proud alumnus. What a great, stimulating conversation. I'm very grateful for your time. Thank you.
Brilliant. Lovely to talk to you again, David.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you.
And that was another edition of Lancefield on the Line.